All right, so when you come into the studio, here's our setup here. So we have some nice, these are Yamaha speakers. We've got the Mackie Big Knob control command center. We've got our computer, our iMac, and a second monitor, and our audio interface. So this is the Universal Audio Apollo 8P, and we've got our left speaker. And over here, follow me, this is like cribs. Come on in, come on in. This is the studio, this is the live room, so we just looked at the control room, this is the live room, and this is where the performers are, and they're recording. This is also a Foley studio, so we have a lot of props and stuff in here that we do for recording and recreating sounds to motion picture. So anyway, this is also a really good sound studio for music. All right. Okay, so when you come into the studio, the first thing you're going to do, there's a sequential order in which you want to turn all this equipment on. And you always want to start with a computer. So on the left bottom hand corner of the iMac is a power button. And you'll turn that power button on, and you'll wait for the computer to kick on. So now our computer's fired up. So the next thing that we're going to do in sequential order is turn on our audio interface. So you come on over here to the Apollo 8P. And over on the right hand side of the Apollo interface is the power button. And we'll turn it on. And when you turn it on, you'll see a bunch of lights flash and you'll hear some clicking. Voila, and then it's on. And then we want to look at our computer, and we want to make sure that we see this connecting to Apollo 8P. If you don't see that bar that comes up, actually, this is going to be your next sequential step anyway. You're going to come back over to the computer and log into the student account. You don't need a password to get in there. And down here on our toolbar, or our dock, you'll see an app called the console. And you want to open the console. And what the console is a virtual representation of the Apollo 8P interface. So you'll see this come up on the screen. All right, so the next thing that we'll do in getting things turned on is come over to the Mackie Big Knob. This is our command center, so this is where we're going to do a lot of audio routing here. And on the back side of it, you have a power button. We're going to turn that on. Cool. And then the last thing that we're going to do in turning the studio on is these are powered monitors, and I'm talking about the speakers in the sound studio. Your speakers are referred to as monitors. So we're going to come over to the monitors, and on the back side of them, you'll see a power button, or power switch here. And we're going to turn that switch on. Keep in mind that these speakers are not mounted to the stands, so if you lift them, they're going to come off. You can turn them, but just be aware that they're not mounted onto the stands, so they can fall off if you don't keep that in mind. So make sure that when you're turning them on and off that they're planted on the stands. And then you'll come over to the left speaker, and you can turn it on. There's the power switch, and you can turn it back around, and you'll know that they're on because you'll see the lights on them. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over to the computer, and I think I'll open up the screen grab software now. Alright, so this is the console app. So once we've turned on the audio interface, then we come over to the computer and we make sure that this console app is open and that it's connected to the Universal Audio Apollo 8. And as you can see here, like I was saying earlier in the earlier video, we have 8 inputs. We have input 1, input 2, 3, 4, and these are the inputs that are set up to record condenser microphones. They have preamps to power the microphones. And then we have input 5, 6, 7, and 8, which are set up to record currently line inputs, which is something that would take like a 1/4-inch cable, like a guitar or something. So we have 8 total inputs. 4 of them are set up to record microphones. 4 are set up to record line inputs. So we're just, for the most part, going to be using channel 1, input 1 on this interface. So this is the input that we'll have our microphone plugged into, and that the input that we're going to add this plus 48 volts of phantom power into, and then we can go over to Ableton and open up Ableton. I'm going to turn this 48 volts off for now because I don't have a microphone plugged in. So once we make sure that the console app is connected, we also want to make sure that all of our channels are set to mute. And I can explain this a little bit later, but we want to make sure that these are all set to mute. We're going to open up Ableton Live. And what you'll probably want to do is upload your, first of all, open your project on your computer, and you'll need to do a collect all and save, and then you'll upload that entire project folder to your Google Drive, and then what you can do is access your folder, your Google Drive from this computer in the studio, and download it to a folder for yourself, and then work from this computer. And then essentially you're going to have to do the same thing to get it back onto your personal computer. So if you're using a PC, we might have to figure something out. I'm not sure if they're cross-compatible. So anyhow, now that we're in Ableton Live, what you need to do in order to make sure that Ableton is connected to the Apollo is we need to go into our settings, our file, or excuse me, our preferences. So if you're working from a Mac, you come into the Live tab up here up on the toolbar and go to the Preferences menu. And when you come up to the Preferences menu, you'll go to the Audio tab. And right now you can see that our input device is set to no device, and our output device is set to our built-in output, which would be the speakers on the computer. So we need to change this to be connected to the audio interface. So we'll click this drop-down menu, and you'll see right here we have the option to select the Universal Audio Thunderbolt. And this is the Universal Audio Thunderbolt Apollo 8. So this is the Universal Audio interface that we want to select as our input device. We also want to select this as our output device. So when we go to our output device, we'll select Universal Audio Thunderbolt, and now we're fully connected. Ableton is fully connected to that audio interface. So we want to double check that our sample rate is set where we want it. We want to make sure we're at 48,000 kilohertz, and we'll go back over to the Record Warp Launch tab and make sure we're recording WAV files at 24 bits. So then we can close out of our preferences. And now, when we want to record audio, I'm going to take these MIDI tracks out of here, and in fact I'll just have one audio track to make this simple. You'll see that down in this menu, and I'm going to just close these windows to create a little more space here. Alright, so I've got audio channel 1 here. Right here on all of your audio tracks, you're going to have this option to select where your audio is coming from. And now that we know that we are connected to the Apollo 8P, we want to select the input channel that we want to record from. So when we click this drop-down menu, first of all, we choose our device, and we're going to leave this at the default setting, external in. So this is an external device as our input, and that's the Apollo 8P. So then in our channel drop-down menu here, we're going to be recording on channel 1, and as you can see, it's displaying 8 inputs. These are all representative of the 8 input channels that the Apollo 8P offers. We can also record these in stereo pairs if we want. Channels 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and 7 and 8 can be recorded together if you wanted to create a stereo image. But for now, we're just going to stick with a mono image, and we're going to have this input selected as channel 1. So now we're connected to channel 1 of the Apollo 8P. The next thing that we're going to do right here is it says monitor. And if we have this in the off position, we are not going to hear what is being sent into this channel from the microphone. We would see the levels of it, but we wouldn't actually be able to hear it. So we're going to turn this to auto. And this means that anytime that this track is armed, we're going to hear what's coming through that channel. So we're going to leave this right here for now, and then we're going to get a microphone hooked up and show you how to get audio coming into and out of Ableton. Alright, so we're back in the studio, and as the engineer, it's the engineer's job to get things set up for the talent that they're going to be recording. So we're going to start off with the mic stands. So we have a few mic stands in here. They've all kind of been a little bit beat up, but we have a few that still work pretty good. So the idea when you're using a mic stand is that you never force the mic stand into a position. All of the joints here can be adjusted with, you know, basically like clamps, where you can unscrew and screw and tighten things down. If you start to force these, then obviously they start to degrade in quality, and then you have like really kind of loose, crappy stands. So we have a few different places where you can adjust the mic stand. We've got the first one down here, which is basically the telescoping setting. So if we loosen that, then we can raise and lower the mic stand. And then if we tighten it back down, we can clamp it down. We also have one here at the elbow for the boom arm, which then can be set to whatever angle you want. Make sure to just tighten it down when you're done. And then we have this other telescoping setting here, where you can extend the boom pole out or not, or shorten it or whatever. But the idea is that when you set up your mic is that you have the weight of the microphone over a leg. So you want to have that extra support in case that mic gets heavy. It's not going to fall on somebody. So you always want to have a supporting leg under the boom arm.
Supporting leg.
Ooh. All right, cool. So then we're going to set up a microphone on our stand. And whatever we're using right now, we have an AKG microphone. This is a condenser microphone. And we have the microphone clip for it. So these are called microphone clips. And you screw the clip onto the mic stand, and you put the microphone in the mic clip. So this microphone is interesting because it's a condenser microphone, but it also has an on-off switch. And this is because this microphone can also have its own preamp. Essentially, it has its own power supply. If you unscrew it, you can see that it has a 9-volt battery in here. And so this is just in case you don't have a preamp, but you have maybe an input on an interface or something that doesn't have a preamp, then you can actually power this microphone with a battery, and it will supply its own phantom power. In order to get any sound out of it at all, whether there's a battery, we're using a battery or not, it needs to still have the on switch in the on position. So just leave this in the on position when you use it. But just know that there are microphones that if you don't have a preamp, but you have an input, you can still get condenser mics that have their own phantom power supply. All right, so we'll put the mic clip on the microphone, or excuse me, on the stand. And you just screw it onto the end there. Till it's snug. And I'm actually going to lower this down a little bit so it's a little easier for me to get to. And then as you can see, this microphone's clip, when I got it snug, it's all crooked. So then I'm going to use this adjustment down here to loosen it so I can spin that boom arm. And I might shorten it a little bit. And now my microphone stand is straight. And then we got the microphone, and microphones can usually just clip right in like that. You can also slide them in from the end, but I'm a little crippled right now, so you can also just pop them into the clips. All right, so now we've got our microphone set up, and I'm actually going to flip this around. And just remember, we've got it over our supporting leg here. So we've got the weight of the mic over the supporting leg. And now we want to put a pop filter on, or a pop screen. And what this pop screen does is just a very thin, basically like a pantyhose type of material. I don't know what that is. But basically what it does is when somebody's singing, they might, especially meant for P's, like where you go, puh, it kind of diffuses the air so it doesn't blow out the diaphragm on the microphone. So it has a clip down here on the bottom side of it that you can screw down and tighten to the pole or the rod, the boom arm on the microphone. On the microphone stand, excuse me. So we can tighten this down onto the stand, and then we can position it wherever we want. And I'm just going to set it a few inches out, 2 or 3 inches away from the microphone, so that the air has enough time to diffuse before it gets to this microphone diaphragm. I can change the height of it a little bit. Alright, so now we need to hook up the second part of our signal flow, essentially. So now we've got me, we've got the microphone, now we need to connect the cable. And over here in the studio you'll have one XLR cable, or maybe two. Anyway, we're going to run the female end out to the microphone. I'm going to try to keep this nice and neat if I can. So I'm just going to take out the amount of cord that I need so I don't have a bunch of cable all over the ground. And then to kind of keep the microphone cable out of the way from people tripping on it, usually what I'll do is I'll kind of just wrap it around the boom pole a couple of times to just kind of keep it out of the way. And then we can connect it to the microphone, and we want to hear that snap. So now we know it's clipped into the mic. Alright, so on the other end of our XLR cable, we have what I was talking about earlier. We have our patch bay. So this is how we get cables from one room into the other without having a big hole in the wall and basically losing the integrity of having a soundproof room. So we have these labeled for our inputs. So this input here, XLR input 1, is the XLR input 1 on the audio interface. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are all of the 4 inputs that can supply phantom power. So we have those set up to be used with microphone cables and microphones. So we're going to plug this into microphone cable, or input 1. We also have input 5, 6, 7, and these are the line inputs. So this is where we would use something like a 1/4 inch cable for like a guitar. And we'll talk about these cables a little bit more later. So these are for XLR input, or excuse me, 1/4 inch cable inputs. And these also have releases. So make sure that if you're using one of these inputs that you make sure to use this release. Now input, what we would normally have set up for input 8, we didn't have enough of this style of 1/4 inch cable out inputs basically for this patch bay. So we used what we would have normally used for input 8 for our headphones. So there is no input for channel 8 right now. We're just using this 8th input to get our headphone jack from one room into the other, and we have now this headphone extension cable that we'll run out to our headphones for our talent or the musician. So we'll run our headphone extension cable out. And we'll grab some headphones. So there will be a set of headphones in here. Voila. And usually I'll just, while I'm getting things set up, I'll just hang the headphones on the microphone stand, and then we'll get it plugged in to our headphone extension cable. So now we should be able to hear everything that's coming out of the computer in here in these headphones. And the reason we're listening to everything in the headphones is because if we listen to everything through the speakers in here, that's going to get picked up on the microphones. So we need to have our headphones on so that we're only picking up what we want to record. Alright, let's go back in the studio. Alright, so now we're back into the engineer side of the equation here. And so like I said earlier, we've set up Ableton to, on audio track 1, to be receiving the signal from audio input 1. I've gone into the other room, I've hooked up the microphone, and so now all I really need to do is turn on the phantom power for the for channel 1 on the console. So I'm going to go over to the console app. I'm going to go to channel 1, and this can all be done on the hardware as well, the rack unit that's in the studio. I'll show that to you next. But essentially, excuse me, everything that I'm doing in the virtual console is being represented on the hardware as well. So you can work from either or, and you'll see the same effect. So we're just going to work inside the console app right now so you can get an idea of what's going on. So the first thing I need to do is turn on this plus 48 volts for phantom power. Now, when I set an input, this is my input level. So as I turn this level up, the microphone becomes more and more sensitive to sound. So this is how we get our input levels. So when we have a talent or somebody come into the studio and we're going to record them, it doesn't matter what they're recording, we want to have their input level, or basically set the sensitivity of this microphone to come in at around negative 12 decibels. So we want to look at this volume meter down here, and this is our input meter. So as we record, we will see a level coming in, and we want to have that level right around negative 12 decibels. That leaves us a lot of room. That leaves us quite a bit of room up here of space, of volume that we're not using. And this is good because we want to have that space saved for us later when we start mixing. We have room to expand and put effects on that audio. So this is what we call headroom. So we want to leave ourselves some headroom when we're recording. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's an incredibly screaming loud guitar. You want to set the sensitivity of this microphone to where that loud guitar is coming in at a negative 12 decibels. If you're recording somebody whispering, you want to get as close as you can. Usually whispers and things like that, you can't get as loud, but even if you're recording some quiet, nuanced stuff, you want to come in at around negative 12 decibels if you can. So this is where we adjust the input volume of the microphone, and that is different than the output volume. So over on the bottom right-hand side, on the bottom right corner of the app here, we have our monitor output. So this is how loud we're sending audio out to the speakers. In our case, we're sending it to the Mackie Big Knob before it goes to the speakers. So we're going to have basically 2 volume controls. We'll have several volume controls as far as the output goes, but this is the first one that we have here. And this is on the interface itself. So we have our input volume, sensitivity of the microphone, and then we have the output volume that we're sending first to the Mackie Big Knob and then from the Big Knob out to the speakers. So usually you want to leave this about 3/4 of the way. You don't want to turn it up all the way, but you want to have a good amount of volume going out to the Mackie Big Knob. So leave it about 3/4 of the way as far as the monitor output goes, and the monitor input is always going to depend on the signal that's coming into it. So the sensitivity of the mic is always going to change depending on what it is that you're recording. Now, if we had these channels unmuted, what will happen is this console app is a place for you to monitor sound coming through the interface. We're also using Ableton for that same purpose. So we're going to be monitoring the sound coming in Ableton, and we're also going to be monitoring it in our console app. So what happens if we leave this unmuted, first what we're going to hear is the audio coming through this app, the console app, and then we're going to hear it a fraction of a second later coming through Ableton. So what happens is we're going to hear that same audio 2 times, and it's going to sound really weird. It's going to sound kind of very robotic, and it's going to sound just not natural. So you always want to just keep the channel muted in the console app because it's being sent to Ableton where we can monitor it from Ableton. And that's where we want to be monitoring it, is because this is where we're recording and doing the work. So just keep that in mind. Keep these muted. Otherwise you're going to be hearing the audio 2 times and it's going to sound really weird. Now on any of these inputs you can change the type of input it in. it is, excuse me, if you want to have a mic input or a line input. We just have this set up kind of all in its kind of default setting, just so it's easy for you, so you don't have to come in here and change anything. So we're pretty much set up to record on channel 1. So if I come back over to Ableton, so I've got my plus 48 volts on, I've got my input level, and I'm going to go ahead and set this. I'm going to see if Hemi will go into the studio and record with me. So I'm going to do a pause here, and then we'll come right back in a second. Okay, so we're back here. Now I've got Hemi out in the studio, and the first thing you're going to want to do before you start recording is get your levels. So Hemi's talking, yet we can't hear her, and there's 2 reasons for that. The first reason is because I have her muted in the console app, which is normally what I would want. But the other reason is because I don't have her armed or turned on in the Ableton app. So when you're getting someone's levels, you're going to want to do it from the console app, because it's going to give you a true reading of the input level. We're going to make sure our levels are set to 0. And now I'm going to unmute Hemi just to get her levels.
Hello. Oh, I can hear myself. Hello, hello. Hello.
So usually what we'll do here is...
Check 2. Check 1, 2.
Okay, sorry. All right, so usually what we'll do here is we'll have the person singing at or performing at the level that they would record. So if Hemi were to be in here singing, I would ask that she sing a part of the song, and I could even play it back for her from Ableton. I wouldn't have her armed or recording in Ableton, but I would come back over to the console app and I'd be playing the music from Ableton and have her singing the part. So then I could get her level. So let's just listen to her first of all, from the console app. So Hemi, what did you eat for breakfast today?
What did I eat for breakfast? I did not have breakfast today. I only had a coffee. What did you eat for breakfast?
All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to mute Hemi again. So as you can see, what we're doing here is we're setting the level of the input. So when our performer is performing, we want to get a good level on them. Now we don't want to go changing the output levels. This is the input level here. So now what's happening is we got a good level. We've set her level, the input level, to be a pretty good -12 decibels. So now what we can do is we want to make sure to mute this console app. We'll come over to the Ableton. And now we want to hear Hemi in Ableton. So first of all, we've got to set our device input channel. We're on channel 1. We want to change our monitor section here to auto. And what this does is when I press arm, now we can hear Hemi. She's coming.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Hello. Check 1. Check 2.
All right,
I want
cool.
all the checks.
So now the thing to keep in mind is if I change the level of this channel in channel 1 in Ableton, I'm not changing the input level at what she's getting recorded as, because that's the input level. So our input level is different than our output level. So if for some reason I wanted to turn Hemi down or up in the mix, then I can do that in Ableton. And if I want to change the output level of everything entirely, I can do that with my master channel. And there are other levels at which we need to adjust volume. So we're going to need to adjust the volume of the headphones going out to our talent. And we also have the ability to talk back to our talent through the talkback function on the big knob. So we can hold down a button, and when we talk, the person in the other room can hear us in their headphones. So the next thing we're going to get into is the Mackie big knob and how that can be integrated into this whole signal flow, the idea of signal flow. So I hope this is making sense. So what we've done here is we've connected our microphone to channel 1. We turned on phantom power for channel 1. We set our input level before we go into Ableton. We've set our input level of our talent. And then we go into Ableton. Once we get that, we can mute this channel. And in fact, you can get somebody's level while having this muted. If you want to hear them back, you can still arm the track in Ableton and hear them back, but you're setting your input level right here in the console app. And then again, we're sending an output here, an output level with this monitor knob here, and we're sending that out to our Mackie Big Knob, which we're going to talk about next. All right, so now if I wanted to, I could record Hemi.
Hello. Can you hear me now? I want a croissant. Got me thinking of food. Yeah, okay.
All right, cool. So now we can see that we've recorded this into the session view. If I come down here and I open this window again and I click on our clip editor, here's Hemi's clip. And we can also drag this out into the arrangement view. And click back to arrangement. We'll press stop and we can listen to this back.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
All right, so we're going to unarm that track. And then we can move on. If we were to create a new audio track and we wanted to record a vocal layer or something, then we come down to audio track 2. And we have the same display here, our ins and our outs. So we're going to set our input to channel 1. And now if we wanted to record in the arrangement view, we click a global record button. I would probably mute this in this situation, arm the track, and now when I press play, now we're recording again. And remember, you need to turn this to auto if you want to hear it. So go ahead. Apparently you can't switch from off to auto while you're recording, so you need to do that beforehand. One more time, Hemi.
Hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello.
All right, so we've got our signal. We could record. And we're recording.
We are recording right now. This class is amazing. Great job.
All right, so I hope you guys understand that. So make sure that when you open up the console app, then you come and make sure that Apollo has been connected. Come to the preferences, audio, and make sure that you're connected to the universal audio for your input and your output device. And we want to have a low buffer size while we're recording audio. I would say 256 or less. All right, so we're going to talk about the Mackie Big Knob next. All right, we're back. All right, so I want to talk to you about the Mackie Big Knob. So in our situation, and what I've talked to you guys about so far is I'm going to talk about signal flow to death here. So our analog audio comes in through the microphone, goes through the XLR cable, goes through the patch bay in the wall, comes into the audio interface. It gets converted from an analog signal into a digital signal. Through a FireWire or Thunderbolt cable, it goes into the computer. And the first place it goes is the console app. And that's why we can hear, if we unmute these channels, that's why we can hear it out of the console app. So then what's happening is it's going from the console app into Ableton, and then we hear it back from Ableton pretty much simultaneously. So Ableton's taking the input, it's sending it back out of that device that we selected as our output, which was also the interface. So it's going back out of that Thunderbolt cable simultaneously as the audio signal's coming in. It's getting processed and coming right back out to the audio interface. And then we have a volume control for the amount of volume that would normally be going out to our speakers. And this is that. So when we look at the console app, the monitor button on the bottom left-hand corner of that app is this same monitor output. All right, so it's leaving. So then that signal leaves what would normally be going out to the speakers, but in fact, before it goes to the speakers, it comes to this Mackie Big Knob command center. So think of it like this. I don't want to get you too worried about all these cables that are coming in here. So don't look at them. It just might be a little overwhelming. So what this command center does is we have 4 possible inputs that we can connect into this device. So, and we can select those inputs to play back if we want to. We can select various inputs. So we have one right now connected to the computer, and that's called our DAW mix. Excuse me, this is the interface. So that rather than the interface sending out to the speakers, it's running into the back of the Mackie big knob, and we're selecting to hear those speakers, the DAW mix. We don't even have to worry about any of these other ones. This is if we wanted more inputs. We don't need more inputs, so we're going to just leave the DAW mix button depressed, make sure that light's on, and you're set. The next thing that's going to happen is that input is going to run through a volume knob. So you now have another output control here, how loud you're hearing things in the speakers. This output control is connected to the speakers in the studio. So you use this control to turn up or down the volume. And then over here we have our monitor select. So we can hook multiple speakers up to this command center. Right now the studio speakers are A set speakers, our set of A speakers. So if we turn this off, we're not going to hear anything out of these speakers. We want to have that button pressed down. Our B speakers is the sub. There's a subwoofer underneath the desk. I would suggest leaving that off for the most part, otherwise it can get, it's not really necessary while you're recording. And we'll just leave the others off. So really, all we have here is a volume control for the DAW mix that's coming from the interface. And then we have our speakers that we've selected and our volume control for those speakers. Now this cable right here is going out to our headphones. So this, when we were on the other side of the patch bay, I was talking about our headphone extension cable. That's where this is being connected to. So we have two headphone outputs on this Mackie control on this big knob, and we just have one of them that we're using, and this is output 1. So this is the level that your talent is going to be hearing in the studio. So if they need more volume, this is where you're going to turn up the volume. If they need less volume, this is where you're going to turn that down. And then the last thing you need to know about this interface, or about this command center, is your talk back buttons. So if you want to talk back to somebody in the studio, in their headphones, you hold this button here, the very bottom right hand corner button. And that will enable the little microphone that's built into this command center and allow them to hear you in their headphones. And this is the level at which they'll hear you. So you have your output of your talk back. Usually you want this pretty low, because it can be very loud in someone's headphones. So I turn it up about 1/4 of the way, and they should be able to hear you fine. There's also a foot pedal that's underneath the desk if you want to step on the foot pedal to activate the talkback button. But otherwise that's it. So we have our DAW mix button pressed down so that we're getting the output from the interface. We have our volume control for our studio speakers A. We have the output control volume for the headphones, and usually that's about 1/3 to 1/4 of the way. Seems to be plenty loud for most people. And then we have our talkback button, our talkback area. So we'll press this button to talk back to anyone in the studio, and then we have the level at which they'll hear us. And that is the command center. So this thing can do a lot of different things. It can have up to 4 inputs going out to 3 sets of speakers. And it can even do a little bit more than that. But we don't need to worry about any of that for this class. We're just going to use the DAW mix as our input, the speakers, the set A as our studio speakers. Then we have the volume control for that. And then we have our headphone volume, and we have our talkback and our talkback volume. So that's the Mackie Big Knob. And then from this area, it leaves out to our speakers, out to our headphones. So we've added another stop, essentially, in that signal. So now what's happening is the signal is coming from the mic through the XLR cable, through the patch bay, into the interface, getting converted from analog to digital, going into the computer, getting recorded, simultaneously getting sent back out through that same cable, going back to the interface, going out into the Mackie Big Knob, and then going from the Big Knob out to our speakers and out to our headphones. So this is signal flow. And we're back. Okay. All right, so there's a couple things I want to show you about this audio interface. And I've taken it, I've unscrewed it so that I can pull it out and show you the back side of it. I need to be really careful that I don't unplug anything. and I want to show you what the back of this interface looks like. So on the back side we have input 1, 2, 3, 4, and as you can see we have our 4 XLR cables ready to supply phantom power because these 4 have preamps. And then we have 5, 6, 7, which are set up for line outputs, or inputs, excuse me. So if we wanted to connect a guitar in the live room or whatever it is, we have the inputs for these with these 1/4-inch cables. And then input 8, we don't have anything because we used that for our headphone output. All right, so then we have the signals that come in here. Let's say audio channel 1. We have the signal that comes in to audio channel 1 being powered by the preamp. It gets converted from analog to digital. It leaves through this Thunderbolt cable. It goes out from the Thunderbolt cable, goes into the console app, then gets sent into Ableton when we set up Ableton to be configured to this device. And then immediately and simultaneously the output comes back out through the same Thunderbolt cable and goes out to our big knob with these 2 cables here. So these 2 cables are the output that are going to the big knob, and then from the big knob we have them going out to our speakers and to our headphones. So some people like to come in here and they like to just use this area and they want to engineer themselves. And if you're going to engineer yourself, it's really tricky if you're going to be engineering in the control room and then running out into the live room trying to catch it on time, which you can actually do when you're using Ableton, because you could just get your loop going. You could press record on your session view, and you could go in there and do as many takes as you want and engineer yourself that way. But what happens is sometimes people like to come in here and unplug input 1 just by reaching behind there, unplugging input 1. And if you do this, make sure that your phantom power is not turned on. Make sure when you're unplugging cables that the phantom power is off. And then what they like to do is they like to hook their own cable up to this, their own XLR cable, and set the microphone in this room. Now, you're not going to be able to pull this out, but what you can do is you can reach around and pull out input 1, connect a new XLR cable, and set up a microphone right here in the control room, and you could engineer yourself. In that case, you would want to turn off the big knob, turn the big knob all the way down, or just turn off the speakers, because you don't want audio coming out of these speakers. And then you could just plug your headphones directly into the interface, or you can plug them into the big knob, input 2. It doesn't matter because they're both getting the same signal. So if it's a little bit more convenient to plug into the interface, if your microphone is here, then you can plug your headphones into the interface and engineer yourself in here. If you do this though, you need to make sure that when you're done that you disconnect your XLR cable and that you connect this one back into the interface. Because I can't tell you how many times I've come into the studio and people go, input 1 isn't working, I'm not getting, my phantom power is on, everything's connected, and I can't hear anything. And it's always because somebody left this unplugged, and this is breaking that signal that I'm talking about, that signal flow. So you need to make sure that if you need to be responsible enough to set the next person up for success. So if you come in here and you hook up your own mic and you want to engineer yourself in the studio, you need to make sure that you reconnect the input 1 coming from the room when you leave. And if somebody forgets to do that and you're having issues, and when you come in here with getting input into channel 1, reach behind the interface and make sure channel 1 is connected. All right, cool. So if you decide that you're going to come in the studio and you're going to record yourself, and you need to plug in the headphones into the interface, remember you can plug it in here because we also have our output here. So we have 2 headphone outputs you can plug in here, or you can always plug into the Mackie Big Knob. You just want to make sure that the speakers are either off or turned all the way down, or even deselected, so that you're not hearing audio from the speakers. And then a lot of headphones are made with 1/8-inch adapters. So this is an 1/8-inch adapter. All of our hardware in the studio is set up for 1/4-inch adapters, which are much bigger. So you can connect these adapters to basically create the bigger plug. Go from 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch, and then you plug that into your headphones, and you can turn your headphones up or down in the studio here. So we'll set some of these 1/4 inch adapters in here. We can set them up here on the windowsill. And I think that's it. So I'm going to show you guys now how to turn the studio off. All right, so now that we've learned a little bit about signal flow and we learned how to record audio in this studio, and we're all done, we've saved our projects. You want to make sure you're saving your projects, do your collect all and save, and make sure that when you transfer it back to yourself on your drive, you're uploading the entire project folder, not just the file or not just the samples, everything that goes with it. So now you're ready to shut everything down. So we're going to do this in the reverse order that we started it all up. The reason why we turn the speakers on last and off first is because anytime you're turning on and off hardware equipment and those speakers are turned on, there's a possibility of them popping and blowing. So not to say it will happen, but it's the risk you run if you do. So the idea is that you always power the speakers on last and you always turn them off first. So the first thing we're going to do in shutting down is we're going to turn our speakers off. So we'll go to the speakers, we'll go to the switch in the back and turn them off. We'll go over to the other side and we'll also turn this one off. Just spin it around, turn it off. Alright, so then I'm going to turn off the Mackie big knob, and on the back right hand corner I can turn off the Mackie big knob. And then I'm going to come first over my computer and I'm going to close the console app. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my phantom power is turned off, because I'm going to start disconnecting things, and when somebody else comes into the studio, I don't want that phantom power to be on because they might connect microphones and mess up microphones. The idea is you don't ever want to connect anything when it's powered. You want to first connect it, then power it on. So we're going to go ahead and close out the console app. Quit. And then we'll go into Ableton. We'll make sure that we've done our saves and collect all and save. And then we can quit Ableton Live. I'm going to not save this project. And then we can come back over to the interface and we can turn it off. So we'll turn the interface off, and then we come over to the computer and we shut the computer down. So this is the order that I want you guys to power everything down. The order I did earlier, powering everything up, is the way I want you to power it up. So power up is computer, interface, big knob, speakers. To power it off, speakers first, big knob, make sure your session is saved, close everything out, turn off the interface, and then turn off the computer. Alright, now let's go clean up in the studio. Are you still rolling? Mm-hmm. Alright, so when you come into the studio and you set all this stuff up for yourself and your talent, you want to reset this studio and put everything back where it was so everyone else can set it up the way that they need to. They don't need to be coming in and tearing down your things and then setting it up for themselves. So we need to all do each other the favor here and have some studio ethic, and that's cleaning up after ourselves. So we will roll this cable up. We'll roll both the cables up. So we've got the XLR cable and we've got the microphone cable. We've got the microphone, so I'm going to just lower this so it's a little easier for me to get out. Oh, kind of weak here. All right, so then we'll put our mic away. All right, so we can put this stuff away. There's a case for it over here. Thanks, Emmy. So we've got a case for it. It's also got this kind of like a wind muff and the mic clip, and then a mic clip adjustment, like a reducer. So we can close up the mic. And in fact, I'm sure you guys noticed this. I was using the AKG, and then we switched over to the Sennheiser MKH 416. So this is a much better mic. I was getting a lot better response out of it from the interface. So we're gonna just leave this microphone in here for you guys to use. Now I want to roll up these cables that I pulled out. So when you're rolling up cables, you don't want to strangle what I call strangle cables, where they're rolled up really tightly. You want them to be nice and loose, and cables usually have their own kind of natural way they want to be rolled up. So usually you can just kind of roll it up and twist and turn a little bit and feel where that loop should be made. It should just be nice and easy. Don't wrap it around your elbow and your shoulder, and don't wrap it around your hand real tight. The thing is, it should be nice and easy, nice and loose, so that the cable lasts a long time. Otherwise you start fraying the cords inside of it. So we're going to roll this up. We're going to get it set up for the next person. We're going to set this right here by our patch bay. Same with our headphone cable. If you want to leave it plugged in, that's fine. You can just roll it up here. So just roll it up. It's a little twisted. There is actually a proper way to roll up cables, but we'll save that for another day. And I'm not actually doing it right now. But anyhow, so we can just roll this up and keep things nice and tucked away. Over here we have another 1/4-inch cable and another XLR cable if we need them. But for the most part, you guys should be fine with one XLR cable, one headphone cable, and then you've got your microphone and your pop screen and your mic stands. So that's our lesson. That's our tutorial of the studio. I want to give a huge shout out to Hemi. Woo! Thank you, Hemi, for helping me with this video. And I hope this is helpful. It would have just taken so long to do it with 3 different groups, especially with this current situation. It probably just isn't the safest idea. So you have this video you can walk along with, or you can always contact me via Teams, or give me a call, shoot me a text. All right.